I seem to lose my SD card once every 6 months, so I guess I'm right on schedule. I have no idea where it is, but I really wanted to film this video, so I'm just gonna go ahead and do it on the FaceTime camera, which hopefully is not that bad. I wanted to talk about the books that I read during the autumn readathon, as well as some books that I read after that. I'll start with my autumn readathon books, of course. The first one that I want to talk about is Rebecca, which got 5 stars for me, which is very unusual, especially for like a fiction book of this kind. And I think the key to this book for me was the writing and the atmosphere that du Maurier created. In this book, we follow a young woman who is unnamed, and she is working for an irritating older woman when she comes across this man named Max in the Winter, who just recently became a widower after losing his wife Rebecca. Our main character kind of becomes swept away by this man and ends up, getting a proposal from him out of nowhere, and she ends up moving with him to his estate, Manderley. Of course, all of this is happening with the memory of Rebecca still existing in the background, making it difficult for our new bride to get to know her new husband, especially because Rebecca's death was so tragic and everybody kind of just remembers all the great things about her. Rebecca's shadow really leaves us with this ominous and mysterious atmosphere, which was my favorite thing about this book. Du Maurier writes in a really enchanting, entrancing, intoxicating way that kind of begs you to keep reading. I also thought that the twists and turns that occurred throughout the book were ones that I didn't really see coming, and I find that really impressive considering how old this book is and just how many different kinds of twists and turns I've read in books before. I was still kind of shocked by some of the things that happened. Most of all, I think the characters are really strong here, and I feel like every character has something going for them. Like, all the characters are very flawed. You're not gonna root for all of them. Even the main character, she makes some decisions that you're like, what? They're still very engaging, and I think that they're still very perceptive about the things that they actually can see. Like, everybody has their own blind spots, including the main character. The way that she views how other people are interacting and the looks other people give each other, and just like the general chemistry and emotion that is coming off of different people as they're talking, I feel like du Maurier really writes well. I really enjoyed this book. It was so much fun. It was such a great ride. I really valued my time with it, and I'm just asking myself, why did it take me so long to finally get to Rebecca? So I'm really happy that the autumn readathon had this challenge of reading a gothic novel, because it really forced me to read this book, and I just devoured it. I loved it so much. The next book that I'll talk about was sadly kind of a dud, and that is Touching the Void by Joe Simpson. This follows Joe Simpson and his climbing partner Simon as they are climbing the Andes Mountains. While they are doing this, they encounter some problems and end up in an accident where Joe Simpson ends up actually breaking his leg up like 19,000 feet, trying to carry Joe back and having to leave him because things get so difficult that he can't keep dragging his partner with him. And it's Joe overcoming all of that and basically getting himself down the mountain, even though Simon really thought that Joe was dead. Like, everything that it was marketed as, I feel like it completely failed. I think it should have really been marketed as a technical book about mountain climbing that goes wrong, and not as a poignant testament to courage and friendship. The way that it was really expressed to me as being similar to In the Thin Air and other mountain climbing books that, turn awry, I didn't really see the connection, and I didn't really see what Touching the Void really had to offer. Most of this has to do with the storytelling and how little emotion I felt for anything that happened here. Considering the circumstances, you would think that I would be super engrossed and super captivated by what's happened. This one I found myself skimming parts of it because most of it was just mountaineering jargon that I didn't care to read. You can definitely put words that have to do with mountaineering because it is important. The technical stuff is important to the climbing, but I don't think it should overtake your story so much where you are more dedicated to making sure you're talking about crevices and crampons, and I don't even know if I'm saying any of these things right, and all this mountaineering terminology that doesn't really add to the emotion of the story. So it really took away from that and detracted from that and bored me at times, to be honest. I really know close to nothing about the men who did this climbing. I think I know more about the mountain and the conditions on that mountain. This really is no Into Thin Air or no Dead Mountain. My least favorite mountain story I have read so far. So I would pass on this one and I would read one of the other two that I mentioned. The next book that I read, and the last book that I read for the autumn readathon, I ended up reading 3 or 4 of my books, and that was Frome by Edith Wharton. This kind of follows the catch-22 life and situation of Frome. He is married to a person who he finds kind of insufferable and that he doesn't really want to be with, and he's kind of stuck in this New England town. He isn't really able to try to become something and to use his intellect for something bigger than being on this farm. And he's also trapped in the situation with his wife by also having a house girl who is his wife's cousin that he is really in love with. He really wants to be with this girl, but he can't because he has a wife. And all of this continues going on until it leads to a really sad ending. I found that in this book what I really liked was Edith Wharton's writing and the regionalism that she is known for in this work. Writing about this New England location, the desertedness that you do feel by being surrounded by all this snow. There's really nothing going on in this town and there's no way to really escape it. I really like those passages the most, but what I didn't really like here is the characters. I really did not feel invested in any of them. I didn't care about their stories, and kind of the decisions that they make, I understand why they're there, and like the symbolism that Wharton was trying to evoke, the themes, motifs, whatever, all that literary stuff. She uses these themes of, you know, this is what society wants from you and expects from you. You're married to this woman, you have committed yourself to her, so you must stay with her, versus trying to find true happiness, you know, morality versus happiness. And all of this kind of culminates and ends up with this really melodramatic end, in my opinion, with an accident involving sleds. That's all I will say about that. It kind of felt like his decisions at the end was even another factor to this, of him vacillating so much between society and morality versus like true happiness and fulfilling your desires. Him not being able to decide between those two things actually ended 2 times worse when it comes to what happened in the end. So overall, I didn't really care for the story. It's very short, it's a classic. I listened to it on audiobook, which I liked. Other than that, this book is kind of a pass for me. I started Human Acts, but I didn't finish it. But that's still on my I need to read it before the end of the year list, hopefully. So next I'll move on to the last 3 things that I read that were not for the autumn readathon, but 2 of them I did read like during the autumn readathon, and they were graphic novels. The first one is Locke and Key, Heaven and Earth, and this is the new collection of one-shot stories. There's 3 one-shot stories in this novel from the Locke and Key universe. I thought that some of them were really great and others were not. There's only 3, so it kind of felt middle of the road for me, and I didn't really understand why this was published. I know that it was meant for a convention, but really not worth the money. Check it out from your library if you're interested. I would not pay for this. So the first story I really liked, actually. It was a father-son story. It was about questions of deciding to let go of suffering, even though that means you're going to let go of someone you really love. It was really touching for me. The second story I did not like very much, mostly because it used these really villainous people and had them like attempt rapes or almost attempt rapes. I did not like that at all. It left like the worst taste in my mouth. Even though it ended up okay, like the people in the house ended up using the keys and the house's abilities and magic to get out of that robbery situation, but why was the other stuff in there? I don't really know. I didn't really like it. And then the third story was a really short one. I wish it was longer. It actually had Kinsey, Tyler, and Bodhi from the original Locke and Key series. The end of the book was pictures of the creators going around and visiting the areas that served as inspiration for Locke and Key, and then lots of gallery art at the end. The second graphic novel that I read during the same week of the autumn readathon was The Gigantic Beard That Was Evil, and this actually might be one of my favorite graphic novels of the year. This follows Dave, who lives in here, and here is kind of the opposite of there. Here is very tidy, it is unchaotic, very safe, kind of robotic at times. Nobody has facial hair, everybody's just like neat and tidy. This is in contrast to the there, which is known as a place of chaos and evil and where nobody wants to end up, so they keep their distance from there and stay in the safety of here. Dave has no facial hair, but he has one random hair that comes out of his face, and one day this actually ends up forming into a beard. that at first he can cut off, but then it starts growing really fast. He can't stop the beard from growing. It ends up taking over his street, then his town. All of the townspeople gawk at him and, demand for his removal and demand for action for his beard to go away. This sounds really out there, but I think it serves a social commentary, or at least it did for me. What the author was getting at is questions of conformity and people who don't look like you, and who we let in our society, who fits in our society, our reaction when somebody doesn't fit in the way we want them to fit in our society. He also becomes a celebrity, and this kind of takes a postmodernist take on this, turns into this media event for consumption by everybody else. So not only are we against him, but we are also consuming his story as if it were entertainment. I really got a lot more from this than I initially anticipated when I opened it. I also think that the art and the writing is really great. The writing is poetic and at times it rhymes, which I really like. The art is really, really beautiful, I think. It has this pencil art. I really thought that this one did things that I hadn't seen other graphic novels do, and took on really interesting social commentary as well. Last but not least, I want to talk about Salvage the Bones. I finally finished, guys. This book is largely really devastating and melancholy to me. It follows Ash, who lives in Mississippi on the Gulf of Mexico in this place called the Pit with her 3 brothers and her father. And it is 12 days before Hurricane Katrina comes. We get to see the little things that her brothers and Ash are going through. And while all of this is happening, they are still thinking and grieving the death of their mother. For me, it was about Ash trying to love and trying to be loved, and using sex to try to find that love that she really wants. She ends up pregnant at 15. She really hides that information from everybody else. It's a secret. I feel like that's also because this book is about the internal isolation she feels, though she is surrounded by her brothers and her father. I think that she really at heart feels alone, and that's why she keeps so many things to herself. Everybody in the family really keeps things to themselves. So all of these little devastations that I mentioned are happening as Katrina is getting stronger in the Gulf, building up to the destruction and the suffering that we know that Katrina brought to the area. The real standout here for me is her writing. Her writing makes you feel like you are there. You're smelling the things, you are tasting the things, you are being smothered by the weather. All of this, of course, comes to a head when the hurricane actually comes. While I think that it ends on a good note, it tries to wrap things up with a little bit of optimism, I know that that might also be just things that people are saying to each other a month from then, or maybe a year from then. Life for Ash and her family is going to remain hard, or at least that's how I viewed it. For me, it was really interesting how they didn't even think to evacuate. It was never a topic of conversation. Nobody in their town thought to leave, and that tells you a lot about their position. They can't leave because they don't have the money to leave. But overall, I really did enjoy Salvage the Bones. I actually just got Memory Reaped. It's up there. I think I'm gonna get to that one next, and then I'll get to Sing and Buried Sing. But I am happy that I finally got to try Jesmyn Ward. She's kind of been a hyped author on BookTube lately. That is it for me and my really long wrap up. I hope you got some recommendations from here. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you in my next video. Hopefully I find my SD card, or I'll have to buy a new one. Bye.